Thank you very much. I remember my microphone. Good morning and welcome to BCP Council's Cabinet meeting for September, our second meeting in September. Before we start the meeting formally, I'm just going to pass over to our Democratic Services Officer to refer to our housekeeping document. Sarah.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and mute or turn off your microphone when you're not talking. If you are accessing via Teams and you'd like to speak on an item, please indicate by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. For those in the room, please note that there are no fire alarm drills planned. And if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Braidley Road under the flyover or in the surface car park at the front of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so let's get into the formal agenda. So agenda item 1 is apologies. I've had apologies from Councillor Barron and Councillor Johnson, I believe on Fire Authority business, and Councillor Beverley Dunlop. Sarah, have we been notified of any other apologies? No
further apologies received.
Yeah, and we have Councillor Broadhead joining us online, so thank you very much for that. Okay, so then we move to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No, I'm not seeing any of those, so we will move on to agenda item 3. We've got the confirmation of minutes, which have been shared. I'm very happy to propose this, and I believe Councillor Nicola Green is seconding that. Thank you very much. That's great. Any comments or questions in terms of the minutes? No? Okay. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 4, which is public issues. So we have had no questions today, all petitions, but there have been 5 statements submitted by members of the public. We do have some of those members of the public in the room, so we'll invite those to come in. And I believe, Sarah, you'll be reading out the statements of people who aren't here. Are you able to suggest in what order you would like to proceed? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So we'll deal with the statements in the order that they were received. First statement relates to agenda item 7 from Jonathan Martin, and I will be reading that out on his behalf. And it reads as follows. Without a functioning crematorium at Poole, BCP is seriously at risk when an unexpected failure happens at Bournemouth Crematorium, e.g. fire or flood. Failure to immediately replace the cremators at Poole increases the carbon footprint of the council, as more people travel to Bournemouth for funerals and more coffins are transported a longer distance for direction, cremation, committal or full services. Further, the council's opportunity to serve the community and create a resilient business are seriously jeopardised. Having replaced a cremator, do the research about future investment in alternative technology ready for the demise of Bournemouth cremators. Insert cremators now. Thank you. That's the first statement, Chairman. The second statement is also on agenda item 7 from Nick Douche, who's present at the meeting, to read out his statement.
So if Nick could please come and join us. We've got a space there, and Councillor Green will sort your microphone out. Thank you. Take your time. Welcome.
Good morning. So my statement is broken down into 3 parts. So cost. The financial analysis reported is flawed. A proper analysis shows strong commercial return on investment and availability of private investment. Future capital costs at Bournemouth make alternative investment essential. Demand. Strong and increasing demand exists for public facilities which cannot be met by facilities without excess and unacceptable travel. Private facilities distort demand and prevent choice. Public service. The petition shows strong local public support. Transporting loved ones to Bournemouth is distressing. Bournemouth Crematorium will need short-term significant capital investment. Council taxpayers expect local services for loved ones. One bariatric cremator at Poole essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Sarah, please can we move to the next speaker oral statement? Thank you.
Thank you. So the next statement, also relating to agenda item 7, is from John Ainsworth, Chairman of Churches Together, Paul, who is here to read out the statement.
Good morning, John. Please take your seats, and Councillor Green will put your microphone on. Thank you.
My statement is, 1, don't delay decisions until 25-26. Pool will lose business permanently. No increase in carbon emissions rather than a reduction. The carbon emissions in Bournemouth will be reduced by the same amount with a cremator in Poole, i.e. replacing with similar. There will be a saving in travel across the conurbation to Bournemouth Crematorium. Get an expert's report now on electric cremators rather than delay. Depending on the report, either install an electric or gas cremator in Poole now. Bournemouth Crematorium only has one bariatric cremator. A bariatric cremator in Poole will provide backup. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Sarah.
Thank you. The fourth statement for this morning also relates to agenda item 7, and it's been submitted from the Reverend Paul Hockley. He's unable to attend and has asked that this statement be read out on his behalf, and it reads as follows. 1. When people in Poole realise that after a service at the Poole facility, the body of their loved one will be transported later with other bodies to Bournemouth for cremation, they are likely to look at alternative venues, thus a decline in revenue at Poole. 2. Electric cremators have been installed in Oxford and are apparently functioning well. No carbon gas is harmful to the atmosphere. With a life of 25 years compared to 12 for gas, the larger initial cost is more than repaid by the ×2 length of service. Thank you. And Chairman, the final statement relates to agenda item 6 and has been submitted by Philip Gattrell. It's been requested this be read out on his behalf, and it reads as follows. Contravention of the Local Government Act 1972, when KPMG reports withheld from requesting councillors' inspection. References, my explanatory email, 31st of August 22, to Monitoring Officer, and YouTube, 1st ONS Committee, 2nd of September at 1 hour 10 minutes, plus Cabinet, 7th September at 34 minutes 18 seconds. Following my request to the CEO to investigate the above subversion of democratic processes affecting all members, and his email response 13th of the 9th 22 to determine the best course of action, I call for his exercise of constitutional powers to immediately ensure MO's obligatory reports to each member under Local Government and Housing Act 1989 concerning the uncontested contravention of Section 100F of 1972 Act, and expedite necessary internal procedures establishing the interactions between MO and decision-making leader contributing to this unchecked contravention, taking into account, for example, MO's email 7th of the 9th 22 to me declining to respond substantively, contrary to verbal commitment at meetings 2nd and 9th 22. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that draws to a close agenda item 4, public issues. Thank you very much for all of us, for those who took the time to respond both in person and in print. And we'll take those into account as we get through to the items. Okay, so we move now to agenda item 5, which is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committees. What I'm going to do here is what we normally do, is actually take these items, take the Overview and Scrutiny chairs in the papers that they get to. So we'll do that. First of all, agenda item 6, which is the finance strategy update, and we've got the supplementary pack, which is the full report in front of us. So okay, let me introduce the report. And then we will bring in the Overview and Scrutiny chairman to come in on that. Just in terms of Overview and Scrutiny, we had a really robust and a helpful session yesterday. 2.5 hours, and I really appreciated the time. So, Councillor Williams, I really thank you for facilitating that. The previous meeting, it was helpful. In terms of, we've got the report in front of us, and there's the detail in it. What's my job to do now is to introduce it, and I think we can all say we've had really strong progress materially strong. We've moved from an MTFP gap of 36 million when we looked at this report in the early September to 16 million now. So we've really materially moved that gap forward. I'll just pause to thank our officers and my cabinet colleagues for the significant amount of work that's gone on in the month to move that forward. I want to be clear about the process, because while we're in the process of applying for a capitalisation direction to fund our transformation costs from government, we've had that minded to letter from the Minister, Paul Scully, which we were appreciative of. We've been in discussions with DLAC talking about how the process to balance the budget, and we've done that with them in advance of 30th of September by talking through the progress we've made now, which is that progress from 36 million down to 16 million, and then the remaining process will be to bring a paper in October to this cabinet in October, which will close the gap. And it's in the report, but I'll just say it really clearly. Now we are really confident that through the work of cabinet and CMB colleagues, we'll be in a position to close that gap fully in October. I think it's worth teasing out, highlighting that we've now moved in the report to a £4 million surplus in the year, which is really quite remarkable in the context of we've got £25 million of expenditure movement since the February budget was put together in relation to the cost of living crisis. So despite having £25 million of cost of living crisis in the year, we're still looking to project a £4 million surplus. So there's been fantastic work to get that done, and puts us in a much stronger position for 23-24. Moving on to 23-24, that's where the material gap is. As it says in the report as well, there is a £30 million assumption now in terms of cost of living, the cost of living crisis and effectively inflationary pressures that have moved that budget effectively the wrong way for us. We've now moved that gap down to 16 million. So we've made really good progress with that. So many of us would be aware with a normal budget setting process of. Just 1 second, thank you. Yeah, we've got a normal budget setting process where we'll have gaps regularly, but we need to fill it this time of year, and this is now getting into a very manageable state for us. So without the cost of living crisis of £55 million, we would have a significant surplus, which is well received. I think it's also worth pointing out what the report shows is that. If you actually look at the length of the medium-term financial plan, it's actually quite different than we've been used to because of our transformation agenda and the fact that we've been able to plan to take out significant cost and make efficiencies largely through back offices and procurement. We actually get to a point when this gap is closed, when this £16 million gap is closed, we will have a 4-year balanced medium-term financial plan, as long as in closing that is for recurring measures. So this is a genuinely quite remarkable, situation in terms of what's the usual expectation of local government. Certainly, in my 12 years in local government, we've never been in that strength. So we're close to delivering really genuine long-term financial sustainability, which is always our goal. And I'm really appreciative of the help of all of our colleagues to deliver that. I won't go into specific detail in terms of how we've moved from 36 to 16 million. I'll highlight paragraph 27, which talks about the work streams that have been undertaken there. We've got a number of work streams still outstanding, which take more detail effectively. So I'll highlight those if we can. We're doing some really interesting work with our health colleagues through the new Integrated Care Board, and we really welcome that. So we're now going to work through some of that work with health to get a bit more granular in terms of how that will impact positively our budget. And we started a quite material piece of work around vacant posts and agency costs. So we have a number of vacant posts where it's been difficult to fill vacancies, and some of those vacant posts have been there for a significant amount of time. So it's right that we have a review of those and see if there's any restructuring through those vacant posts that we can bring to the table, as well as increasingly high agency costs, which are financially difficult for us. So we're bringing a piece of work forward which will be ready to report to the October meeting around agency costs as well. And there are some comments in this about some actions we're taking earlier around agency. We've talked in this paper about fees and charges, how we are trying to move to more a full cost recovery basis. So we're affected a bit more commercial and resilient in terms of how we set our charging structures. There's further work to do with that, so that again should land positively by the October report. And the government have been really positive across both to consumers and to businesses around their energy support, and a lot of our assumptions around that 55 million are based on energy. So we now need to model what that government support will move the situation to, which is great. So we're really confident we'll be in a position to balance this budget by October, which is early, and then that will deliver us largely balanced 4-year medium-term financial plan. Just one last thing I think it's worth me just raising. It's related more to the forward plan actually, but we've brought a new paper. This work we've been doing, we put a new paper on the forward plan to talk about the cost of living crisis. What we wanted to do was to bring a paper forward that materialises some of the things we're discussing in the paper now, but probably more importantly, provides an opportunity for us to reflect on and challenge and test what we are actually being able to deliver, government and locally, for people who will be in really, people who will be worried personally, businesses who will be worried, as well in this, fast changing environment. So we've always, through the COVID environment, and again through this environment coming really, hard to put our residents first, we're trying to do that, and I think that paper will give us an opportunity to test that work is going forward across this council. Okay, so I'll probably I'll stop there and invite. I think effectively Councillor Green thank you very much, has just seconded the paper because Councillor Broadhead would normally, but technically isn't because you're not here. Phil, perhaps you'd like to come in and join me in that introduction to the paper, and then I'll bring in the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny. Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor in person. I'm doing a peer review for another local authority in a very cold north of England at the moment, but I think it's just suddenly got cold everywhere. I just want to underline a few of the points that you've raised, in particular the really quite really positive joint working that's been going on through both elected members and senior officers as we deal with some of these financial challenges. Very much a one-team approach, and I think it's enabled some real strategic thinking behind some of that task. So again, thank you, really deeply to all those involved. As you've expressed, Chair, we've got two major financial challenges that we're dealing with as a local authority at the moment. That the first is how we fund that council improvement and transformation programme following the changing guidance around flexible use of capital receipts from government. And again, like you, I'm extremely grateful to the work that we've been doing with DLUC, not just with their minded to offer that we're working through with them, and that certainly gives us a really interesting option of spreading that cost over a longer period, but also just a collaborative relationship we've got with government in general, because we share a lot of these challenges with other people. So I'm really, like you, I'm feeling very confident that first challenge is now very much in train as to how we fund that council improvements programme, which is really important, not just to make sure that we are providing the best services for people and providing a local authority that's fit for the 21st century, but also because it's pretty integral to a number of our long-term cost savings going forward. So it's critical that we do it, critical that we do it right, and it now looks like we've got a number of options to take that forward really positively. But of course, the real quantum of pain that we're experiencing is the second financial challenge, which, as you've highlighted, is around the cost of living inflationary pressures. And a reminder to colleagues, it was only a few months ago that this didn't exist. So the very fact that we're sat here now talking about a £25 million in-year pressure for something that wasn't even on the horizon back in our budget setting earlier on this year, and 30 million next year. So as you pointed out, £55 million of brand new pressures, and the fact that we've made this a really positive work to not just deal with those pressures but close the long-term financial gaps, again I think is a testament to all the hard work. And of course this is shared by not just councils around the country, but people. Anybody that's opening their energy bills or dealing with inflation at the moment knows that these are very difficult times, that costs are increasing on a daily basis. So I think it's absolutely right that we have this budget setting earlier rather than later, in recognition of the fact that we have to deal with that challenge. And as I referenced, referenced, this is something that particularly upper tier authorities across the country are all dealing with. The Local Government Association did some calculations early on this year, so back in May, and the situation has changed since then, and there's some updated figures coming out soon. But only back in May, they estimated that the impact of the cost of living inflationary pressures on local authorities was around 2.4 billion, in addition to the challenges that they're already facing. So actually, in many ways, the fact that we will be here in hopefully a few weeks' time at the next cabinet, having dealt with that pressure through this year and next year, actually puts us in a quite a good position compared to many other upper tier authorities. And speaking to other leaders across the country, the amounts that we're talking about, the percentage terms of the pressure that's put on is the same, if not greater, in other local authorities. So I will continue to like many others, try and work with government, because I do think we need a sector-wide approach to this. But again, I think the fact that we've made this progress very early on gives the confidence that we are ready to look at any challenges that are ahead of us and deal with them calmly and confidently. Final point I would make around the financial challenges and the immediate pressure that we faced around next year, and of course our singular focus is on making sure that we have a balanced budget for next year. But as you touched upon, Chair, the impact that has on the 4-year medium term financial plan is really quite significant, particularly because of our transformation programme. And in this report, it does demonstrate not just the progress that we've made in only the last few weeks. So figure 1 shows the position that we're facing in our cabinet meeting earlier on this year, and over that 4-year period we had a 28 million pound pressure. We've now brought that down to 14 million pounds. A 14 million pound gap over 4 years, as you've said, that is a position that I can never remember being in. Of course, things change and new pressures will come out of the way, but better to be in that position, ready and waiting. But also, I think it's really important to talk about the extended journey we've been on about closing that gap, because 1 year ago today, we took a similar MTFP paper through this cabinet, and at that point, our extended 4-year term showed an 86 million pound gap. So the fact that on top of the 55 million pounds of additional pressures through inflationary environment that we're dealing with, on top of that 55 million pounds, we've also brought that long-term medium-term gap down from 86 million to 14 million, plus the 50 million. And whilst dealing with that 50 million, I think shows incredible collective effort. And I wouldn't have thought a year ago that we'd been able to close that, and that was even before the inflationary pressures. So we've still got tremendous amounts of work to do, and I think we need to be open and honest that some of the decisions that we're having to take as part of this process are clearly not the ones that we would like to make. But I think the strong position that we're now in, the renewed relationship with DLUC, can give us the confidence that if further settlements come through from government, or if new things arrive, then we're ready and waiting to deal with the challenge. So I think great work from everyone. Still more work to do, but I think demonstrating that the one team approach really is working. Thank you, Chair.
That's great and really helpful. Thank you very much, Phil. Okay, so now I'll bring in the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Lawrence Williams. As I said, we had a 2.5-hour overview and scrutiny meeting last night. Lawrence will confirm, but I don't think there are any formal recommendations, but perhaps you'd like to give us a flavour of the discussion and feed that back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we met last night in a special meeting to discuss the Cabinet Agenda Item 6, which, as you've said, is the Finance Strategy Update Report. A number of public questions and statements were received on the matter, and the meeting ran for 2.5 hours. Although the committee did not make any recommendations to Cabinet, a detailed discussion took place amongst committee members and additional councillor attendees, and the committee was grateful for the attendance of you, the leader, and senior officers and their assistance in those discussions. The committee has resolved to, at a previous meeting, to scrutinise the monthly budget reports scheduled for Cabinet, and intends to continue this into the next meeting in October. The committee was advised last night by officers of the need to shift its date for the October to be able to take into account the October budget report, and I will now be working with officers on this to ensure that the important scrutiny of the Council's budget can continue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, really helpful meeting. And please thank your members for facilitating it. Okay, so now it's for me to ask other members of cabinet, not cabinet, apologies, the wider members of council to speak. And I have Councillor Mike Cox. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, and again, up Kings, you don't get the privilege of my face. I just wanted to comment really on something you said, Leader, about emphasising that you're now going for full cost recovery. In actual fact, that means increasing fees to the maximum, and I appreciate your trumpeting the savings to residents from not increasing council tax, but you've given in one hand and you've taken away in the other in terms of money from actually the most vulnerable of our residents, and not necessarily from the ones that can afford it. And I appreciate you're feeling very confident in what you think you might achieve, but I can assure you there is an awful lot of people in the council and elsewhere that are not as confident, and I believe that is also reflected in the officers as well. The cabinet, the budget setting, the fact that you're proclaiming that the budget setting is being done now as some sort of achievement is quite remarkable, given that the only reason we're in this position now is because of the mess that you've created by coming up with that dodgy deal over the beach huts, which is that's why we're in the position. That's why we're having to make the savings now, and not in a more comfortable environment. I appreciate Councillor Broadhead is doing a peer review. I can only hope that the peer review he's doing gets a better result than BCP got when it last had a peer review, which was quite frankly appalling, and just shows the financial mess that we're in at the moment. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox. I will respond, but I'll take other comments first. Councillor Vicky-Slade, good morning.
Good morning. I share Councillor Cox's concern about the claims being made, and I'm wondering whether you're able to confirm two things for me. You've spoken this morning about the new, or I don't know if it was yourself, it may have been the Deputy Leader, the new collaboration with DLUC, the Department of Levelling Up Communities and Housing. And I'm wondering whether you can confirm whether you have any evidence to support that, because the last letter was quite damning about the council and suggested that if a budget couldn't be closed by the end of the week, that they would not wish to give the loan of £20 million that you need to be able to fulfil your requirement. So what evidence is there that something has changed? Because I didn't see the word collaboration anywhere. Secondly, I'm deeply concerned that this paper has got to go to government at the end of this week, and yet Cabinet is going to apparently sign off something with a £16 million shortfall, with no democratic oversight of what's about to go to government. You may be bringing it back at the end of October, but government will already have decided by then. So where is the evidence that government are going to be content with a smaller shortfall than we had 4 weeks ago? And finally, I've got a concern about the proposal to remove to change the way that the Winter Gardens and Cotlands proposals sit. My understanding, and I'm sure that the Chief Executive can correct me if I've got this wrong, because he explained it to me earlier in the week, was that we had made assumptions in the previous budget that because Winter Gardens and Cotlands are going to be undergoing building projects, that we needed to take out the income from parking over the period of time that they are likely to be built on, where we won't have a car park. I understand the proposal now is to keep that income back in, effectively having pretend income into the budget to prop it up. So I'm really concerned if that is the case, and if it's not the case, then I'm wondering why the Chief Executive explained it to me in that way, and whether there are other forms of income that are assumed in the budget that are really quite fantastic. Because if this is the case, when we do make a decision to build on that, there's going to be a new budget deficit. And that feels a very unfair way of doing things and defeats the object of a long-term medium financial plan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, what I'll do, let me just check if any other members, no other members coming in at that point. So I do apologise. Okay, I'll bring in, I've got Councillor Andy Hadley first, and then we go Hilliard and Iyengar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm struggling because I think you're pinning all of this on the cost of living crisis, and that is a real problem. And the way in which we're handling it in the UK, as against other European countries, is really interesting in terms of the impact, particularly on the poor. And our council needs to help cushion our local population from what your government is doing. But there's also significant costs, and as has been alluded to already, around the failure of the special purpose vehicle idea of remortgaging our beach huts. The cost of wasted consultancy on things like the KPMG reports, in the plural, Freeport city status, and the whole of that bit around the beach hut fiasco, and also choices that have been made about extending our borrowing, and some of that has been hidden in the short term by adding the early interest payments to the loan, but there are already increased costs of borrowing money for the future. And then a choice that you're making to freeze council tax, or the proportion of council tax apart from the social care precept, and push all the money onto those people who are making use of the services, which disproportionately favours the rich and impacts the poor. So I'm just pleading for honesty, really, in terms of the impact on our population, and also we should be here to serve our population and to support them through these very difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Paul Hilliard. Thank you. Paul, just come to the microphone.
Thanks, Leader. First of all, just wanted clarity on recommendation 1. So it's saying now expected to produce a surplus of 4.2 million, but excluding transformation costs. So just clarify what the transformation cost is and how that can show a surplus when you've got those costs. And then moving to the government's capitalisation directive and the conditions. So first of all, the main condition is to provide a balanced budget. So it's encouraging that we're moving to a balanced budget, so over a 60 million deficit, and obviously, hopefully more prudent, lower risk. So the question relates to, again, the one team approach. So when will members see the full budget, see all the figures? And ideally, if you're talking about the Cabinet at the end of October, will budget cafes be held for all members prior to that? And then lastly, the other condition is about external assurance of the council's finances and governance. So who will be providing that external assurance? And to help the process, will you be reconsidering your conflict as leader and finance lead, and also the proposal to increase the debt threshold? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now bring in Councillor Mohan Iyengar. Good morning, Mohan.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, everybody. I'll phrase it as a question, but I'll just lob it in as a statement. On the budget, we had the paper 2 days ago, just 2 days ago, which suggests the books have been balanced for the current year and with a small surplus, and the deficit is on track to be reduced for next year. The discussion is all about numbers, exclusively about numbers, but with sweeping cuts to services and the selling off of council assets, which has enabled that financial improvement, and at a time when people are desperately worried about making ends meet and may be reliant on those council services themselves. Firstly, when will people know the detail of those cuts to the services beyond the paper that was shared? And secondly, specifically, what engagement will be happening with people so that at least some form of, dare I say, acceptance of these changes can be managed as we enter into what could be potentially the worst winter of discontent coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll come to that. And we've got now we've got Councillor George Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I do appreciate that others have covered a few points which I wanted to talk about, but one which is concerning to me, and I do note that Councillor Broadhead is on a peer review for another authority, and I do appreciate Councillor Cox bringing to the table that our own peer review by other peers was so damning and pointed towards the difficulties, the financial difficulties we're in just now. Councillor Broadhead, in his support for seconding your presentation, twice said, well, at least twice said, that it was 14 million. At last night's scrutiny, it was a 16 million gap. Have we magically managed to fill or shave 2 million off the gap between the space of last night and the start of this meeting? And if so, could you clarify if that's actually the case? Or did Councillor Broadhead misspeak since he is elsewhere doing other duties?
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to come to Judith when we get to the because as Judith is a member of our cabinet, so we'll come back to that in a minute. What I'll do now, when I open up to the cabinet members to speak, and Judith will be at the front of that. So let me just a number of questions there. So let me get back to my notes. So first off, we had Councillor Mike Cox and. Okay, so I think, and this actually reflects on a couple of the comments. So a couple of questions we had from people in terms of the approach to do fair pricing and to make sure that we're looking at full cost recovery across our pricing. I think one, it's only reasonable and commercial to do that, and I really do have a difference of opinion in terms of who that impacts and who that doesn't impact. What we're trying to do and have done and have delivered is a low council tax policy which affects everybody, which is really helpful. But you actually look at, if you're charging fees and charges, if you're subsidising them across the council, then it's the people that are using them are being subsidised by the people who aren't using them. So it's only fair and right to me to protect the most vulnerable, but we make sure people using our services, paying, reasonably and appropriately for them, and then we are, resiliently aware of our pricing. And by doing that, we're actually protecting services and, keeping money in people's pockets who at the lower end of who absolutely need it. So I do have a really difference of opinion, and quite a few people mentioned that today. I think, I really do have, again, a complete difference of opinion, and it's, borne out and backed up by facts to Councillor Cox. Councillor Cox is implying that this is not to do with the cost of living crisis. This is to do with financial management of the council. We had from Councillor Cox over a year ago, effectively, last year we should be stopping our expenditure, and then we delivered a £15 million surplus. So I think in terms of the validity of his approach to council's finances, I would question. But quite clearly, in fact, as well, the paper in front of us says there's a £55 million impact of cost of living in 2 years, and we only have a £16 million gap. So if we didn't have cost of living crisis, my quick math says that's around about £39 million in surplus we would be next year. So this is entirely down to the cost of living crisis. Councillor Slade, thank you very much for your questions and comments. I think your first point was around deluxe. So we have, one of the benefits of the process we're working through with deluxe is we've really got more increased engagement. And I know our officers are working largely, on a relatively daily basis, if not weekly. So that exposure has been helpful. So regular contact. Phil in his capacity as a regular weekly meeting, in his national capacity has a regular weekly meeting with the minister, which is very helpful for us, and we appreciate the opportunity to present our and local government's case through that. And I appreciate, Councillor, you might not have been watching the overview and scrutiny meeting, but we were quite clear in that, in answers to questions, in what the Chief Financial Officer said, that there was a meeting on the 22nd of September, which talked Deluxe through our plan to effectively move forward to an improved position in this paper, and then we go forward to an October report, which they will be sent. And there will not be sent any other reports. Again, the Chief Financial Officer, but so there's no report going to government. We will publish our October report. So there is no deadline in terms of the 30th of September. We've already had comfort that that they have comfort with that. So hopefully that provides some clarity. Okay, in terms of your points, in terms of the winter gardens, I think it's we've got to recognise that building in itself, the timescales around that and the expenditure on that have moved. We're looking to see what we can do with that site, and so we needed to update those timings. I'm not going to respond to the comment around pretend income. I think that's something actually you would reference in conversation with Chief Executive. So I wouldn't mind, if Graham would like to respond to that, please do. I think what we can say is again borne out by evidence that if we were setting budgets with pretend income, then we wouldn't have delivered a council tax freeze last year and then a £15 million surplus in terms of our budget. So we're absolutely not. I think the evidence is borne out, and the fact is we set a council tax freeze this year. And we've got a £4 million surplus despite having £25 million of in-year costs. So if we were pretend numbers, that wouldn't be the case. Can I just check, Graham Farrant, would you like to come in at that point, or shall I move on? Up to you.
If I could,
please do. Yeah.
Thank you, Lou. Just to explain, I think I was talking about the entire costs of Cotlands and the Winter Gardens coming out of the budget. So it's the car parking income remains in. We've taken out the cost of capital. We've taken out the potential future income, and that was explained last night at the overview scrutiny. Pretend income is not a phrase that I have used or recognise or have heard before today.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful clarity and appreciated. We're moving. I believe I've answered actually Councillor Hadley's points in the answer I've given earlier. Councillor Hilliard, thank you again. And it's a really useful point to tease out effectively in terms of recommendation one. What that means effectively is our MTFP, our normal budget, is now at 4.2 million surplus, which we're really pleased with. What the comment underneath that is suggesting that where there is a transformation expenditure of £20 million that we've got, which we will need to fund. We were originally funding that through the beach hut piece. So there's two main methods of funding that now, either through the minded to decision, effectively, so we have strong confidence in that, hence it's not shown in the MTFP as a pressure, or it's through capital receipts. And what I've said last night, and we've now working through the work stream around capital receipts so that we can bring into the October report a very clear decision on which route we'll be going. Will we be asking government to work with us on the minded to, or will we be delivering in this year in terms of capital receipts? So we will have that in the next few weeks and some surety on that. Thank you very much. In terms of I think you talked about the full budget and the detail behind that. We've got that. So the normal process is that comes to the February. All of the detailed workings behind that will come to our February council, and that will be published, I believe, early January. To feed into that. So we'll have the full line by line detail then. We will have the October report, which will have the methodology behind how we've, the Chief Financial Officer and myself have got comfort, and we've been able to give comfort to Deluxe and in terms of how we will be progressing towards balancing that budget. Things will change between October and January, but at least we've got confidence we're in a position of balancing it. And just I think it's really worth teasing out the point that Councillor Williams made. He's kindly agreed to change the date of the overview and scrutiny meeting, so that paper can be scrutinised fully by members, which will be helpful, and as it was last night. In terms of external insurance, effectively just clearing up again, there's no final report going to government. It's a process we're working through with to give them comfort, and I'm really glad to say that Adam Richards has been able to do that to date. You asked about the linkage to the debt threshold, and I did talk about this briefly last night. I'll just go again. So effectively, we are bringing a paper. You know, it's gone through audit and governance. We'll be bringing that paper. We would have already brought it because of the sad death of our Queen. We were minded to not have the September council meeting. So we have no plans to change, you know, in terms of debt threshold. I think we need to create the headroom and the ability for us on a case by case basis to invest in our place. And you know, we've got billions of pounds worth of assets. And if we can move them forward through regeneration, we should do that whilst also increasing our long-term financial sustainability. Everything in that debt threshold will have to have a matched business case to it. So increased interest rates. This is a really valid point because effectively that will affect business cases, but the Cabinet and Council can take some comfort through anything going forward in that space. Will have fully costed business cases relevant to the cost of interest at the time. Yeah, we've talked about engagement with Councillor Inga. You know, one thing I will say is nothing in this paper talks about the comment. You know, I've written down is, you know, sweeping sales of assets. You know, nothing in the paper in front of us talks about a sweeping sales of assets. What we will be looking to do is to explore what reasonable strategic assets we've got, and in the next paper we would in October we will talk through where we're going to extend capital receipts or not. So the time for that is probably in the next paper, but nothing in this paper talks to that. You talked well and you know, earnestly about engagement, and I think there is a real opportunity actually now, because we've been able to balance this budget through the October period rather than coming out of that point in January for February Council. We do create more space to do that. We've got a lead member for engagement who will be coming in shortly, and we will work with her to make sure we've got, you know, at the very least engagement we've had previously. But I think we've got an opportunity to do more because we've effectively brought forward that for you know, a number of months earlier. We've talked about budget cafes before. Absolutely, that's something we brought in because we wanted the whole membership to have ownership of the budget, and they've been well received, and we've tried to adapt them in the 2 years we've done them. So and again, we welcome any comments from you know, cabinet members, the wider membership or officers about how those can be improved going going forward. And just finally, Councillor Farquhar, again, thank you for your comment. I think you asked more expressly about the 16 or 14 million pound number, which is very much a moving feast. You know, at the point of this report going, work is still ongoing, so Cabinet will be aware of that. We've had even, you know, good news overnight in terms of you know, some of the income which will have improved the budget as well. So the point is, in the paper is clear at that date the gap was 16 million pounds, but it's a moving feast, and we will continue to work with CMB colleagues to you know, continue to move that on the work streams I've identified in my introduction before we get to that balanced position in October. So thank you everybody for the comments. I'll now move forward to wider cabinet colleagues. The first of those I've got is Jude Butt, and I've got Nicola and Mike, Councillor Nicola Green. Judy, please come in.
Thank you, Leader. Clearly, listening to the debate, what is first and foremost in everything we do is our residents and our businesses. They're at the heart of absolutely everything we do. And also listening, although we have a budget that we must balance, it isn't about notes and coins. It must be about people's lives becoming even harder. Yeah, you know, partly through inflation, but also through past and current events in BCP. Not all laudable, and from which we all must and hopefully learn. Whatever affects our residents, we've got to ensure they're first and foremost. So that said, it's also clear that we're tacitly required by DULAC to return to more traditional methods of funding this deficit gap. So touching on what Councillor Igenga's already raised, what real tangible engagement will be put in train ahead of pending inevitable service cuts? And of course, those inevitable service cost rises. And this is to ensure that we protect those who can't protect themselves. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll come back to that in my summation. Perhaps I'll go to Councillor Mike Green now. Mike.
Thank you very much, Leader. With your indulgence, I think there are a couple of questions that came up, which maybe I can help with as well. Councillor Slade spoke about the car parking income assumption for Winter Gardens of Cotlands, and I'm grateful for the Chief Executive confirmation on what's happening here. That obviously comes within my portfolio, and I just want to make it absolutely clear where it's happening. When the expectation was that the Cotlands and Winter Gardens developments were to go ahead at a very early stage, it quite rightly we made the assumption then that the car parking income would not be available during that development period. That went into the medium-term financial plan. Now, when it looks as though those developments will be delayed slightly, it's quite right that that assumption that we've made of reduced income should in fact be reversed, and that's why that correction has taken place. Councillor Iyengar, I think, may possibly have fallen into a little bit of a trap, which seems to be prevalent amongst some people at the moment, particularly when one looks at the comments in the papers, etc., of confusing the capital budget and the revenue budget. I mean, I very much hope that we won't end up in the with the sale of a lot of assets to fund the capital gap that's necessary for to fund transformation. Certainly, I wouldn't like to go back to where we were a couple of years ago with a real, as I think Councillor Iyengar's words were, a sweeping sale of assets. I'm going to make no apologies for the fact that when this administration came in, we said we didn't want to do that and would do everything we could to avoid it. So I think it's really useful if people do start to understand completely the difference between a capital budget and a revenue budget, which is the ongoing costs that go forward. And the last one was just Councillor Farquhar with referring to the difference between the 16 million and the 14 million. I may be wrong, but I think that what Councillor Broadhead was referring to was a £14 million gap over 4 years, because the report here shows not just the 23-24 situation, but for the following 3 years as well, the predictions on that, and maybe I'll come back to that in just a second. A number of people, certainly the leader and deputy leader particularly, have been talking about what's going on around the country, and while it's very true that we are probably in a considerably better position than many of our counterparts around the country, we do still have an awful lot of work to do, and we need to concentrate on what we're doing rather than what they're doing. Yes, absolutely, we should hope for the best, where the government will be coming in with assistance to local authorities all around the country, and I fully expect that to happen to some extent. But our assumption at the moment is, and I believe should be, to assume that nothing's going to come in, and that's why we're working as hard as we can to ensure that that gap is closed within our own capability, without relying on anyone else. But while it is useful sometimes to look all the way around the country, I think we also want to spend a bit more time on what we're doing exactly here and where we've been in the past. The leader spoke about his 12 years in local government and not having seen percentage gaps as small as these during that time. I've done exactly the same since 2001, where I was first involved in local government, and to be in September with a gap of only 16 million for next year across the with the sort of budgets that we have is pretty extraordinary. But let's just go back and do a real comparison, BCP with BCP. 2 years ago, when some of the people that are speaking today, with the administration led by Councillor Slade, was running BCP, they also had a September report, as they would, on the medium-term financial plan, with their predictions about what the budget gap that needed to be closed. We're talking about a 16 million gap that we now wish to close between September and the start of the financial year. The GAPS administration were in charge in September 2020 that needed to be closed the following year was 49.1 million. So what I'd like to ask is that people are a little bit more grown up about this, particularly some of the opposition members that we've heard speaking. Councillor Cox referred to this as the financial mess we are in. Councillor Slade was deeply concerned and supported that, and also had those worries. So what I want to know is, if we're in a financial mess now with a gap to close of 16 million, what sort of a financial mess were they in with a gap of more than 3 times that to close 2 years ago? And their comment could come through and say, well, you know, that was a COVID year, and they're absolutely right. The same way as we've had a cost of living crisis, which has been an adjustment of 55 million into next year's budget, they had a COVID gap, which was, if I calculate right, 30.2 million. So even if you take both of those events out, where we got to at the moment is we would be showing a surplus for next year of 39 million. They were showing a deficit of 18.9 million, with a further 20 million over the next 2 years alone. So let's really try to get a bit more adult about this. A financial mess at 16 million, whereas everything rosy at 3 times that. Come on, guys. Let's try to work sensibly together. And when I'm talking about working sensibly together, yeah, I would just like to commend the leadership at the moment. And I'm talking about right the way across the Cabinet CMB, but from the leader, the chief executive, the deputy leader, the section 151 officer, have absolutely imposed quite correctly a rigour on the way that the whole organisation is doing its business. And I have absolute confidence that that gap will be closed, and that we will be able then to be able to show, not just to ourselves and to our residents, but also to DLUP, that we know exactly what we're doing, that we have got the appetite to close that gap, that we will be able to close that gap at the same way as it has been closed every year for the last 20 years plus, since these local authorities were around in their predecessors, to be able to do that, and then to start building back in other elements where at the moment we are being very sensible and saying, let's hold on with any new financial commitments. We will be able to bring those back, but we are doing it in exactly the most prudent way that we possibly can. And I said, please, any time people look at these numbers, big though they are, look at where we were 2 years ago today. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. That's appreciated. Okay, we'll now go to Councillor Nicola Green. Nicola.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of comments, really, prompted by, rather than in direct response to the to some of the comments that were made by non-executive members. And the first is Councillor Hadley's implication that somehow freezing council tax was a misplaced use of council resources. I'm sorry, I just don't get it. If we follow that line of thinking, then we would say, do you know what, it's absolutely fine to take money out of our residents' pockets year round because we might need it later. We should have some money sloshing around. Well, that for me is not the responsible way, and it's certainly not an appropriate way to consider all our residents' budgets, and I'm perfectly happy that we're in this position based upon our decision to support residents year round by the council tax freeze that we were able to bring forward. Clearly, there will be some changes to be mindful, and Councillor Hadley is quite right to remind us that we need to be clear about whom these impact and to set our charges accordingly. But I think what everybody wants is that our fees and charges are honest, they're transparent, they're consistent and fair, and that's what this paper is ensuring. And when we talk about full cost recovery, we just need to be, as the paper says, consistent in our understanding of it, and that will also apply to capital projects to make sure that we're consistently applying the right things to them. So I really welcome this further diligent application of the rules. And the second comment I wanted to pick up on, and I won't repeat the words he used, but Councillor Cox's implication that we're only doing this budget setting exercise now because we're in some sort of dire straits. Well, budget setting in September is not news to me. And I'm quite sorry that it is to some members, but perhaps we should do a better job of communicating that budget setting is a year-round exercise. In olden days, we used to joke that we took a week off from setting one budget to moving on to the next. But what happens, and perhaps I should set this out for those who haven't had experience, is that really round about June we start looking at the outturn and what that might tell us going forward. In September, it's absolutely the time, in my experience, of being a cabinet member, where you sit down with your executive director and the finance team and say, right, what are our outline figures? What do we know? What pressures are coming? What do we know about our demographics, about new burdens, and so on? And you have, on the one hand, new pressures that you need to address, and on the other hand, you have these, so how can we best deal with this? And those figures come together gradually, sometimes not in very big jumps, but they do come together. And what you get at the end of it is the set of budget, the suite of budget documents that go to council in February, being informed as they are finally by the setting of the council tax base in January. So it is, in that hackneyed expression, an iterative process. It is a long process. It is hard work, and it involves everybody. Every cabinet member working with the officers, and we also work where possible very constructively with our relevant overview and scrutiny panels. But this is not a new process. This is absolutely what has happened in local government financing for far longer, I suspect, than I've been involved. So we are in this position because we are doing that work that our electors expect of us. We're doing it as transparently and as consistently as we can. And if there is increased grip at this time of year, in this year, I welcome it. Make no apologies for that. I think we are in a stronger position, and I welcome the scrutiny, the transparency, and the absolute hard work, because what we will get to is a solid and a robust and a deliverable budget in February next year. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. That's a really useful discussion for everybody, and really appreciate it, both from the wider members of the council and our cabinet colleagues. Just in terms of summing up, I'll come first to the direct questions from Councillor Tudor. But I think it's you're absolutely right to raise and champion a point around engagement, and we'll work with you closely in terms of what that should look like. As I've said before, we do get an opportunity by having this piece of work happening much earlier than normal to look at where we would like to consult on options, because we prove how we can balance the budget by effectively the middle of October, and then we have a period between then and January when the formal budget will be. So there is an opportunity for engagement, and I look forward to doing more. I think it's worth also just responding to, we are not talking at this stage about any sort of material service cuts. We are at no point in the papers in front of us does that trigger a point where any services be cut to a point we need to, or in an area statutory service would have any consultation required. So we've been able to get to this position, this £16 million position, without having to go to those extreme measures. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to just, to some extent be aware of the situation we're in with a calmness. We are not talking about being in any dire financial circumstance where we have to make stringent service cuts. That's absolutely not what we're saying. That's not what this paper says. We've put a detailed work stream out in terms of how we're going to close the gap between now and October. So let's be really clear about that. This is very normalised, and it's entirely about cost of living there. And also just as a reflection on that, in terms of our the propensity of service cuts. But if you actually look at our record, what this administration has done over the last 2 years, we have materially across nearly every service, increased expenditure, because we are trying to be more ambitious for this place. And we put, tens of millions of pounds into both children's and adult services. supporting our most vulnerable. We've invested more in community service. We've invested more in cleaner, green and safer summer response and the environment. So, our record speaks for itself, and that's exactly what we will be defending going forward. I'll close here. Thank again, Cabinet and Corporate Management Board colleagues for the work that's done and the work we will be about to do, and the response to that rigour that we're putting, a positive response to that rigour we're putting in. Next steps, we've got sort of two main pieces of work here. We've got one, which is that October paper. We've talked through some of the main work streams that will be moving that forward. We've also got, and I think it's a really important point to just reiterate again, bringing forward now a cost of living paper into the next cabinet cycle. We must respond both internally to this cost of living pressure. That's exactly what we're doing to put ourselves in a really long-term sustainable financial position. But we also must respond for our communities, and by taking a paper through and looking at and addressing some of those challenges, we provide ourselves more opportunity to do that. So, I'm really happy to close there. I think let me just go to the recommendations. We've got those as put, some for us and some for council. So I'll move to vote now. All those in favour of recommendations put, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. Great. Okay, let's move now to agenda item 7, another really important paper, which is the Bereavement Services Business Plan Phase 1 Update Report and Options Appraisal for the future Poole Crematorium Facility. What I'll do is I'll come to Councillor Mark Anderson in the first instance to introduce the paper, and then we will move through our process. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to record my thanks to all the Bereavement Services team for their tireless and professional support to the bereaved families throughout the lengthy, unprecedented period of the pandemic. The team provided key support to the Dorset Local Resilience Forum, Tactical Excess Death Advisory Group, adapted to challenging requirements whilst ensuring families continued to be supported and were able to say goodbye to their loved ones. I'd also now like to go on and pick up some of the points that were raised in the statements earlier today. Not necessarily in the same order they were raised, but in the order that I think I would like to raise them. There was a comment about fees and the costs as well. We've reduced the fees for direct cremations now to £350, and we have also had an engineering report about the use of the crem and the fact that we can't reuse the gas cremators, which is something that was raised in the Place ONS meeting. I've also got a comment about the risk of a fire at Bournemouth Crematorium. Well, Bournemouth Crematorium has 4 cremators, of which we only use 2 at the moment. There's a very, very small risk that a fire would completely stop cremations at the Bournemouth cremator. And even if it did, we have contingency plans already in place that would allow for cremations to carry on. So that would not stop cremations, and we would need to have a cremator in Poole to do that. I'd also like to mention about the fact that it was talked about transporting bodies, and I would like to refer to them as the Poole Halo Ceremony Hall to the Bournemouth Crematorium. And quite a few of the local funeral directors seem to think that they can make a little more profit from the deceased by charging for the transportation if they do it themselves. We don't. Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council do not charge for the transportation of any of the deceased after a ceremony in the Halo Hall to the cremators at Bournemouth. I also wanted to talk about the comment that we would have a risk of reduction in business. Well, we've actually had a reduction in business. We lost 25% of our business before we closed the cremators at Poole, and this was when a private cremation facility opened up on the BCP borders. So I think hopefully I've covered some of the comments that have been made. There's also a comment about if people knew that their deceased and their loved ones were being transported from the Halo Ceremonial Hall to the Bournemouth Cremation Centre, they wouldn't go with it. Well, actually, we've got 6 ceremonies going on today, and we've already had 42 bookings since we opened the Ceremonial Hall on Monday. So I think people are voting with their feet and are actually supporting what we're trying to do there. The other point I wanted to just to note is that Someone made a comment about putting a gas. I think the cost of living, which has been alluded to earlier today, it's useful to note that it now costs £50 just for the gas for us to cremate someone in the cremators. So I think it's worthwhile just noting that there's been a huge increase in the costs and we haven't passed this on. But having said all that, I think the most important thing is to note that there's a surge in new technology coming through as a result of the green climate emergency, and the only option that we could take through is option 4 because of this new technology coming through, and the paper I think clearly explains that. But finally, to sum up, I think we need to be very clear. This administration is absolutely clear that it is our ambition to reinstate cremators in Poole, and we will bring forward the right quantum at the right time. And I want that time to be as quick as possible, and that's what I'm working for. I believe I've also got to accept or decide not to the amendment that's been made at place, and I believe my seconder is going to talk about that. So provisionally I will accept that, and I will leave it to him to talk about that in more detail. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mark. And again, I'll just reiterate, thanks for the people who responded and came up and spoke earlier. That was a really useful part of the debate and the overview and scrutiny committee. At this point, I bring in the chair of overview and scrutiny. I had to have a message just a few minutes ago that he'd been called away on a work issue, so I don't believe he's Councillor Sean Gabriel is here now. What I'll do is I'll just I've got it in front. Thank you very much, Mark. I'll read out the recommendation from the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It said, okay, the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommended to Cabinet that, subject to no further information coming forward from a technical report on existing cremating equipment, that Cabinet aim for a reopening of cremators at the Poole crematorium facility by 25-26. So let's just discuss that and respond to that effectively. So we've had a really good introduction. We've understood the situation through the report. I thought the debate and that recommendation was really helpful. My feeling, and I've long said this, I think we absolutely, Poole needs to have a crematorium facility. It's used to having it. It should have it, and it's our job to get to a position where we can deliver that. So as much as I do accept, the spirit of the recommendation, my view is that it doesn't go quite far enough. We need to put more time and pressure on us to deliver that at some pace. So what I'm suggesting is that we accept the spirit of the recommendation, but actually change it. I've just sent an email to our Democratic Services Officer, so this is formally recorded. But I would change that recommendation to Cabinet requests a report detailing options for the replacement of cremators to be brought to Cabinet in the next 6 months, with the aim of working towards new cremators being installed within the next 18 months. So that is effectively what I would like to move forward. So, Councillor Anderson, as a proposer, you'd have to
more than happy to
second that. Brilliant, thank you. So that is now where we are. I think it's a really strong statement to make. It's a strong statement for Poole. It's a strong statement for our ambition in terms of what we want to deliver. There is work we need to do to work out how we do that, and work through that piece of work in the next 6 months. And at that point, in 6 months' time, we will be able to make formal decisions or not, supported by that data in that report, as we assess all of the options open to us there. I think the reason we put 6 months, it's fundamental to me that this happens before in this term, effectively. So we have elections in May. There's a responsibility on us to address this in advance of that, and I'm really pleased that we making a commitment to do that, and I hope Cabinet colleagues will support that recommendation. Okay, so it's open for me now to bring in the wider members of Council first, and then I'll come to members of Cabinet. Thank you very much. So we will bring in Councillor Andy Hadley. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. I don't know whether your seconder to go forward if that's what you want.
Yeah, please do, Andy. Effectively, I proposed to and Mark has agreed that he's happy to accept that so it becomes, my understanding is it becomes a substantive in front of us. Thank you very much. Go, Andy.
Yeah, well, I'm really pleased that this has changed. The paper itself changed quite significantly when it came to place over and scrutiny committee, and I think there is an urgency to restore a level of service at Poole for the population to the west of the conurbation. It's less about technology, more about the dignity and community aspects of having removed the service, because actually it fell out of repair, and that's shameful in terms of the council's operation, I'm afraid. But I know that the team worked very hard on that. I'm really grateful to the bereavement team. They invited members of the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee to go and visit the crematorium, and I managed to get to both Poole and Bournemouth crematoriums on Monday to view the service. The issue about fire risk, actually, in the Bournemouth crematorium, all those 4 cremated are in the same hall, and so I think there is a fire risk or to that. Although again, the team worked really hard to manage that. There is only one bariatric cremator in the Bournemouth Hall, and so there is no resilience there, and for that reason alone, that would promote early movement in Poole. I did some research, and there are at least 7 electric cremators either live or very close to being live in England. North Oxfordshire, Huntingdon, Hamilton in Yorkshire, Skipton, Cotgrave in Nottinghamshire, Lambeth, which is a retrofit, so very similar to what we're trying to do at Poole, Doncaster and Faversham are due to go live imminently. So people talk about just the one, there are actually already 7. So it's not novel to be going down the electric cremator route. And I think, hopefully that should give Cabinet some assurance that going forward with this urgently is a sensible thing to do. I also found a report from the CDS group which suggests that people are attracted to using electric cremators because they recognise the climate challenges and to do their bit to resolve that. It's clear that electric cremators are established technology, and the claims that they produce 80% less CO2 than gas and 40% less nitrous oxides. And Councillor Anderson gave us the bill for an individual cremation, and clearly the costs of gas are only ballooning at the moment. The hope that the electric cremators might be made smaller over time was raised by the portfolio holder. That's really unlikely to happen because they are permanently on, and so they are very heavily insulated. And that's really the driver for the size of them. A resummation is a novel technology, and perhaps we could be considering that when we need to replace the Bournemouth cremators in 7 years' time. And I think that was our real concern with the original timeline that you had, was that by that point in time, the Bournemouth cremators themselves would probably need to be replaced. I was assured from the technical report and the discussions I had with the staff that actually it's probably a 6-month project. So once you've done your evaluation and made a determination, it should be possible to move forward, and therefore your 18-month new timeline is sensible. And I think I commend you on that. I think it's really important because we've just spent £500,000 in revamping the ceremonial hall, and it's good to hear that there are bookings into that. But there has also been a lot of disquiet about the need for people to be moved after the service to a different location. Although again, recognising that there are other cremation services that will do that. So I'm really keen that you move forward with your new recommendation. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Andy. And yeah, on a personal basis, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. Okay, now let's go. I've got Councillor Slade and then Diana Butler. Vicky, good morning again.
Thank you, Leader. I'm surprised, I'm delighted and relieved that you've come up with a new recommendation, but I can't let it be that you can slot it in because you've realised that elections are 7.5 months away, that suddenly the last 2 years' work by the officers has been swept away, when you should have asked the people of Poole, and not just the people of Poole, but wider Dorset that use this service. You should have asked the faith communities. We know you asked the funeral directors service community, and we know that they were not happy with this decision. The population's increasing in the area, not just BCP, but Dorset. And we already know that there is no burial space left in Poole, unless you're willing to reuse a previously occupied space, or you've had the foresight and the finance to be able to book it in advance. So the idea that we would not have had this facility for Poole and East Dorset and Purbeck is really quite shocking. It's really important, because I know this was said last week, and I'm sure it will be repeated again by members of the Cabinet, that the cremations were paused on our watch in April 2020 during COVID. As a last resort, they were temporarily paused. That was the language that was used. And it was always that, temporary. It was done to prevent a catastrophic risk of failure during operation. And that led to the bereavement care team being asked to look at investment options, which they've done. Obviously, it's frustrating that the pandemic's led to such long delays in that process, but it is really shocking that until 10 minutes ago, the intention was that everybody was going to be ignored. It is also worth noting in your paper that there are some contradictions in the paper. It states in paragraph 29 that funeral directors, many of them have their own ceremonial halls and transfer the deceased for cremation elsewhere. Well, if this is the case, why spend £500,000 on updating the ceremonial hall? Why not spend that money on the building work needed to create the bigger space at the back of Poole for the electric cremators? You're not going to be able to do the works on the chapels in Bournemouth because of their much older status and their construction. But this could easily have the conversion for bariatric cremations, electric cremations. So I was really frustrated that
we
you
do
didn't
have a
do
number
that.
of people speaking, so
I'm aware of that. I'm
get
aware
to
of that, but you have changed the dynamic in 10 minutes, which is,
great.
I think,
and this
shocking.
is an opportunity to have questions. So if you'd like to raise a question now, if not,
Yes.
we'll move on to the next speaker, please.
Well, my question is, how can you talk about cleaner, greener, safer when you haven't made a commitment to electric? And actually, it's not just about question. I think we have the opportunity to speak. We were encouraged by the deputy leader last week to come and speak, and I'm speaking now.
And you have done, and you're continuing to. And now I'd like
Yes.
to ask you to ask a question. Thank you.
I'm not going to ask a question. I'm going to say, please get on with it. Actually, I do have a question. Why is it that you've spent 2 years getting the team to write an investment package, and now you need another 6 months? Because we do actually already know what it would cost to put those cremators in. So I think it just be get on with it. The paper is already there. Why are you writing another paper? I know the reason, and it's because there's elections in May, and you know that this is going to go down like a lead balloon in Poole.
Thank you very much. Diana Butler, please come in.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm very pleased that you've changed your mind on this, but I'm still going to bring in some of my points here. I agree fully with the 4 public statements that were made today regarding the crematorium, and I think it's really shows how strong the feeling is of people wanting a fully operational crematorium. As a council, we should really be listening to the needs of the public, churches, faith groups and funeral directors. And the death of somebody not only affects a small group of people, it often affects lots of people. The process of bereavement requires support right from the death through the funeral, burial or cremation, and for many years afterwards. So I feel it's a moral duty of the council to provide a fully functional crematorium. In the recommendations, the demand can't be really reviewed by the facility if the facility does not provide a full service. And because Poole Crematorium has only provided funerals since April 2020, and then operations stopped in March for refurbishments, this doesn't really give a fair assessment of demand. So I think it's a bit like stopping bus services. If you haven't got the service, people can't use it, so they might go elsewhere. So really, it's a case of how you're going to monitor that. But I think also that the importance of income from the crematorium is really important. We don't have many sources of income, and this could be potentially quite a big source of income, and also it's a vital service for our residents. I think Poole Crematorium itself is special because it's very accessible for people, situated in a secluded wooded area with good parking, and so it is really very easy to use and also very comforting for people. So we're also looking after the welfare of people, as well as the practical element. So I think really the timing is really vital, that the longer we leave Poole Crematorium without a cremator, the more likely people might go elsewhere. And this is really awful. So I think your quickening of what's going to happen is good, but bearing in mind that by next May, we might have a completely different cabinet and council. So I think timing could be even quicker, actually, even just for one cremator. We only need one to make it fully functional at the moment. So that would be my real request, that you look at least having one functioning cremator as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Butler, and yeah, a lot of sense and agreement in terms of what you said. Okay, so I'm going to go now. Mark Anderson, would you like to come and respond to some of those points, or would you like to do it in your summing up?
I'm happy to respond.
Okay, great. And then I'll bring in, which I've got. Sorry, I do apologise, Councillor Enger. I'd missed you off my list. Mohan will be coming forward first. Then we go to Councillor Anderson, and then we're open up to Cabinet, which I believe Councillor Broadhead is first on the list. Thank you, Mohan. Good morning again.
Good morning, thank you, Leader. I'm very, very pleased to say that what was originally on my screen to read out is now rapidly out of date. I've checked with the gentleman here from the representatives from the churches. Welcome, absolutely welcomed in principle this latest change. I will say I was pushing very strongly at the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee recently. Did ask for actually within 6 months this to be brought back. Coincidence or not, 6 months is what you've suggested, and just genuine gratefulness actually for the deliberation, reflection that may have happened, since the place meeting, maybe before the place meeting, and so on. So this is positive, undoubtedly. I will, just in the spirit of independently, I can't agree with some of the comments of Councillor Slade on the other one, and because simply, it falls into a damned if you do, damned if you don't, which could apply to not only this, but various other things that may come forward, which are positive as well. So I think we've got to take this on face value. Going forward, very, very important that that is done according to that timescale, that it really is imbued with an independent view coming forward. I don't mean a massive exercise and a costly report, but there is a strong independent view coming in about those options, that it's rigorous, and it also reflects the fact that, of course, in Harbour View, the capacity is restricted. We absolutely need capacity here in Poole. And as long as that's all done within the round of the broader financial discussion that's been done, which is accepted, I think this is positive. Let's get on with it. There are challenges technologically, environmentally, all sorts of other things, but that shouldn't stop important things like this going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just in terms of timescale, the recommendation I put forward would be brought to Cabinet in the next 6 months. So as and when that's ready, we will look forward to take that. Councillor Anderson, if you could.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank Councillor Hadley for his comments. I'm glad he's supportive of the changes we've made. I'd like to just comment on Councillor Butler's comment about one cremator. And the problem with having one cremator is that it will have to be serviced regularly, and we're then back to the situation where the deceased would have to be transferred to another crematorium for burial, etc. And the whole point is that the best practice recommends that you have a minimum of 2 cremators for that very reason, so you can have contingencies. I thank Councillor Enger for his comments, and his comments reminded me that I have had meetings with the churches together in Poole, where we have discussed this subject at St James's Church. So I have been having conversations with them, and I'm more than happy to continue those conversations, as I said at the meetings. But I do take concerns, shall we say, at least, with Councillor Slade's comments. It's quite interesting. We have a paper that was sent to us that says in March 2019, council officers were very concerned about the state of the cremators in Poole. In fact, they were so concerned, they asked for information about the costs for doing a complete refurbish, a rebuild, and everything else of the cremators. Now, Councillor Slade took over as leader of the council in May 2019. along with her Unity Alliance group, and they must have seen this paper. I've seen it. It was high on the priorities for all council officers, and I know she's had meetings with them and the CMB about discussing it. So why didn't Councillor Slade in 2019 start the proposal and the process to introduce cremators then, rather than wait for us to take control? Why did she and her Unity Alliance decide that it was more important to have a phase 1 with phase 2 approach rather than doing as she did? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and yeah, appreciate that comment, and I completely agree with you. There's some rewriting of history going on there. Okay, so now let's go to Cabinet colleagues. I'm going to bring Councillor Nicola Green in first, and then Councillor Broadhead. And Nicola.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Mohan, for picking up on how I was feeling, that we are damned if we do and we're damned if we don't listen. The point of publishing reports and then taking them to overview and scrutiny is for us to come together as collective councillors to do the very best we can for our communities. We will not always agree, but the reason that we have the opportunity for recommendations to be made, to be considered and to be heard, and for members of the public and representative bodies to come and speak to us, is because we all have every right to be listened to. And the recommendation, the revised recommendation that the leader has proposed today is exactly an example of that. And I cannot for the life of me think why Councillor Slade spent her opportunity complaining about that, rather than building upon the positive changes which have been made, and really thinking about how we can best take this opportunity in this very, very difficult area forward in the very best way for the people who need it at the most vulnerable times in their lives. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Agreed. Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Look, I share many of the points, Councillor Nicola Green's. I think one of the things that has been actually a little bit surprising, and this is where you learn from talking to others, and the really interesting statements that we heard earlier on from parties that clearly feel strongly about this, agree with most of the things that they say, and they're absolutely correct, is that sometimes things are a little bit lost in translation as well. I think we need to be pretty clear that the first iteration of this paper before your recommendation, the additional recommendation, was the very first paper that BCP Council has taken that actually commits to bringing forward the reinstatement of cremators at Poole Crematorium. And I think there was a feeling from Cabinet that was a really positive message. We were saying very, very clearly we are committed to restoring the cremators, and we need to now look at how exactly we undertake that. I don't think that message particularly landed, and even though it was pretty clear in recommendation B, clearly through scrutiny and through the other interested parties that we've had, I don't think that message had landed, probably because we were not clear enough about the pace that we would insist upon that process happening. So I think what your additional recommendation does is shows very clearly the impetus and the clarity of timings that we want around that process. I don't think, as one of the councillors said, it's changing our mind. Changing our mind would be if we had a recommendation that says we're not replacing them, and now we've changed our mind and said we are replacing them. What I think you've done with that recommendation is give the clarity that perhaps somehow hadn't been heard, that not only is this administration the very first one to stand in front of the fact that we are going to do this, but now with this additional recommendation to say that we're going to do this at pace, we'll have that report around the options within the next 6 months. And I also really welcome the recommendation, the second part of that recommendation that says that our aspiration very firmly is that we could do that process within the next 18 months. So I hope that gives the community, residents and councillors the clarity that may well have just been lacking, that not only are we committed to this, but we're committed to doing it as quickly as possible, and we take this extremely seriously. I think it's a tremendous move forward, and I hope that the people of Poole in particular take great comfort in the fact that we are doing something about this, and we're going to do it quick. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, last speaker on my list, I've got Councillor Jude Butt. Jude.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to the last speaker, Councillor Broadhead. You summed up a summary of what I was going to say, so I'll cut to the chase. Clearly, as community engagement lead, I'm really grateful for the many discussions and input and advice, and especially those from the Churches Together group, who are no representative there today, and who are representative across the whole of BCP, has been extremely helpful. And obviously the matter at the moment is top of my caseload regarding the tremendous community concerns that we've heard, not only today, but also in the public domain. And they're of great importance to all involved, and finding a collaborative resolution is obviously key. And I feel today, as do other contributors, that has been found, and I am grateful. However, it is clear from the statements that we've heard today regarding the Paul Creme that residents have very much felt out of the loop, per se, to this date. Their concerns somewhat unheeded. And clearly our first responsibility is always to our residents and to put them first. So can we be absolutely certain within the new recommendation that they now will have real input in the art of the possible? Because as Councillor Anderson says, the technology is a myriad. And as to what comes next, we have a short time frame. Let's make it work. Let's make it count. Let's make it work, and let's get it done. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Great. Okay. Well, I really appreciate that from members of the public, members of the stakeholders who contributed, the great overview and scrutiny debate. Thank you very much to Councillor Gabriel for that and the comments we've had here. So now, at that context, I'll move over to Mark Anderson to hopefully briefly sum up, and then we'll move to the vote. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would again like to thank the officers for all the work they've done, but also I'd like to thank most of the people who have commented on this paper for their consensus approach and the collegiate approach, and in response to Councillor Butt's comment, as well as the comments from both John Martin and John Ainsworth, I'm more than happy to attend as many of your Churches Together and Poor meetings as you would like to invite me to. I've committed to that, and I've already said in the past that I will attend that, so I'm happy to do that. I do take exception with one person, and that's Councillor Slade, who again is trying to make political capital when everyone else is trying to be collegiate and work together for the benefit of the people of BCP in general and people of Paul in particular. So she had the chance to do something, she failed, she's now trying to blame us. So I hope everyone will support the recommendations as written, plus the amendment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, great. Let me just now read out what I have proposed as the amendment, just so we're absolutely clear. Okay, so the new recommendation is to replace in the overview and scrutiny. Suggestion was Cabinet requests a report detailing options for the replacement of cremators to be brought to Cabinet in the next 6 months, with the aim of working towards new cremators being installed in the next 18 months. Okay, so in that context, all those in favour.
Please excuse me. You've said new recommendation, but I don't think it's quite clear whether that is an additional or a replacement.
What I've written to Sarah Colwick is C. So I believe it would be effectively a new recommendation C. The point is valid, but whether it's a new recommendation or additional one, that's what we're voting on. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Great. We'll move on to the next item, which is well, I have been clear. Sarah, we have to discuss this. We will move on. Okay, Sarah, please come in.
From what I understand, Leader, the recommendations that are set out within the report will still be intact, but there will be an additional recommendation between B and C, which will become a new C. Then the previous C will become D, and the D within the report will become E.
Absolutely right.
Is my understanding.
That's the clarity. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your assistance, Sarah, really helpful. Okay, so now, and thank you, colleagues, people who are now leaving. So we now move to agenda item 8, which is carer strategy. I will technically, Councillor Karen Rumpton will be proposing this. So Karen, in fact, if you're okay you're happy to propose it, great. And I'll second it. And sorry, I'm not seconding it. Lawrence Fear, Councillor Fear, perhaps you could come in and introduce the paper.
Sorry, Leader, I got slightly confused there. I just want to say a couple of words.
Say a couple of words first, and then we'll bring
in Councillor Fear, because this strategy has had massive input from Councillor Fear, our lead member for wellbeing, as well as, of course, from our carers and groups. So it's a great paper. I'd like to commend the work that's been done on this by Councillor Fear. It's been co-produced. I think the officers have done an amazing job. Councillor Fear is the expert on it, and I'm just going to hand over to him now. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, which is where I was trying to get to, but you did it much more succinctly. Lawrence, please come in.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, for your support and help on this paper. Also, as well, special thanks to Tim Branson and Emma Senior for all their hard work, dedication, and other officers, and most importantly, all the carers and their hundreds and hundreds who have taken part in this process, this long but worthwhile process, to bring to you today, the Cabinet, a fantastic carer strategy. So just a few words from me regarding this. I have to say it's been a really exciting process. Through this, we've had 5 core aims that have come out of this. So we have identification, recognising and being involved. We have information and advice, and we're changing and adapting to that. A life alongside caring, which is a new way of looking at how we support carers when they're not caring. And then collaborative working across Dorset. And also how we are helping carers when looking at this review. It's been very interesting when we've been taking a multi-layer view on how we're going through every process and how we're upgrading it. And that's why I'm very pleased that we have this big crossover now of supporting carers' physical, mental and emotional well-being. That has been one of the core aspects of this, of being inclusive. We're also happy with the upgrades and how we're going to be improving our information delivery to carers. And this is kind of a wider strategy that we've had with this paper, because we've wanted to go through this process with carers, and they've been at the heart of this. And we as a local authority are undertaking a pledge that we will be proactive and not reactionary, because we want to be the ones going out to the carers in the community and saying, how can we help you? What can we do for you? Instead of having carers come around at the 11th hour and then we're there trying to react. So I'm very proud of how this paper is going to deal with that, and we could be moving forward on that. This has also been a great time for working with other bodies, other local authorities, third sector partners as well. So I'd like to thank them for all their hard work with this as well. And in closing, Leader, really, I would just like to say this is a paper that was made for carers and was made by carers at the heart of it. And I really believe that this paper will benefit carers for a long time to come, and in doing so benefit thousands of residents. So I'd definitely like to say thank you so much to everyone that's helped, including yourself, Leader, the rest of the Cabinet, officers, and carers, and thank you very much for your time.
That's great, thank you so much. And now I'll move to I believe, Councillor Kelly. Are you coming in to second the paper? You just formally, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I'm absolutely delighted to second this paper. And I'm really, really pleased to see the multitude of different local organisations, third sector organisations who have taken part in this. The community engagement has been second to none, and I really acknowledge that and congratulate you on the way that you've managed to get right into that, that group of people who care for others, who often go unlistened to, unheard. So thank you for that, and I second the paper.
Fantastic, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Do any of our wider colleagues, give me a check from Council. I've got notes, so then I'll go to Cabinet, which is Jude's. Councillor Butt.
Yes, thank you, Leader. To echo the comments of Councillor Kelly, and in my community engagement role, as you know, I tend to be sort of the bad bro out there. But on this one, having read the paper and its content, it's been a really brilliant approach. It's been thorough, and it's kept reflecting back. It hasn't just moved forward, which is what must always be done. I really commend it, and I really would like to see some of this best practice transferred to other departments. So, Councillor Fear, if you so felt you'd like to share that with other colleagues across the council, and obviously the officers who've worked so hard with you, it really is commendable, and I really see some huge benefits coming out of this, and I wish you the very best with it. Thank you, Leader.
That's really helpful, thank you. I've got Councillor Bobby Dove. Bobby.
Thank you, and I echo the comments that we've heard today on this paper, the excellent work done by our lead member, our portfolio holder and officers, especially in terms of engagement. And this isn't just a strategy paper, it's more than that, and it's a step change, which just doesn't put carers at the heart of our decision making, but their well-being in deciding and informing what we do as a council. It is a much longed for and crucial strategy to support many families across our conurbation, and especially as we see this new cohort of sandwich carers increase. And this is where families and the carer will often look after an older parent whilst managing a household with children. And we see this reflected in our workforce as well. So looking at the paper, I'm really glad to see the voices of the carers come through loud and very strongly. And again, it's what we have heard coming through from our workforce. So some of the comments that I've picked out are that perhaps carers don't see themselves as carers. This is business as usual for them. They don't actually know they're carers, it's just automatic. And as a result, carers can often neglect their own health until they are in crisis. So therefore, it's important as a council, we're not just seen as a provider of services, but we are seen as a community leader. And I'm really pleased to say that we have agreed for taking the lead in this sphere to support our workforce and have formulated a staff network group simply for carers. So we can look at their needs and ensure that we are moving really forward at pace. What we're also looking to do with that is to formulate a carer's passport with the principle of just tell it once. Our staff network groups are an integral part of our council, and ideally they'll feed directly into our decision making, which will then spread out into the communities and how we deliver those services. So I really hope that this step forward can help provide confidence for other organisations in our area to look at how we are supporting our amazing carers across BCP, and as a result replicate the same within their organisations and community. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Completely agree with that. And just as a reflection myself, I think there's some really important work that goes into this report, but it's much about the culture of why it's important. I think that's as well, and the fact that that work has gone on and is going on will only bode well for us across the council going forward and as our place. So I think it's going to take some real pride in the work that's gone into that. Okay, I don't have anybody else to speak, so I will look to move to recommendations as put. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's great. So now we move on to agenda item 9, which is the SEND programme of expansion, Broadstone Middle School. And I'll ask Councillor Nicola Green to introduce that paper. Nicola.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies, just bringing the recommendation up in front of me. Apologies. Members will be aware, because I tell you at every opportunity, of this council's ongoing programme to support the increase of school places for children with special educational needs and disabilities across the sector. This particular scheme that we're looking at today creates an additional 8 places for children with autistic spectrum condition at Broadstone Middle School, one of our mainstream schools and part of the Cusman Academy Trust. It's a real ambition of the council to provide places for children with additional needs within mainstream schools wherever possible, and we're delighted to support the governors, the staff and students at Broadstone Middle School to provide facilities for a group of young people to enable them to stay an additional year. Funding will provide for the expansion of the existing resource base, creating a new timber frame building, space for small group work, which of course is absolutely crucial for this cohort of young people, toilets and ancillary spaces. Temporary arrangements are made with the youth club during the construction phase, and I'm very grateful to all the people actually who've come together to make this work. The youth group, grateful for the support of the ward councillors, and I would particularly like to draw members' attention to the comments of the head teacher in paragraph 8. If you need to know what the point of doing this is, then always ask the head teacher. And their support for this group of people is an absolute exemplar, and we'll be hugely pleased to support it. I will, if I may, make a brief comment about the finances, which appear as a confidential appendix to the paper. The figures which were included in the original published version were based on the pre-tender estimates, and as such were scrutinised by Children's Overview and Scrutiny on Monday of last week, 20th September. Since then, those tenders have been received, and in keeping with many other projects, we've seen an uplift in construction costs. I will consequently be asking that the approved budget is revised in line with the with one of the second lowest tender cost estimates to make prudent provision for further examination of that work. This still sits within the tolerance of government's value for money assessment, which of course we need to recognise itself is based on construction figures from March 2021. I see that the updated figures have now been published by Democratic Services, and therefore I can ask Cabinet to make the decision in the light of this new information. And I'm just looking for Democratic Services to confirm that that's the case.
I can confirm that the updated addendum sheet has been published.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and therefore Cabinet can be confident of the figures that they're looking at now. And can I just make my huge thanks to Sarah and Democratic Services and the Monitoring Officer for being able to reflect these updated figures at very short notice. And I'm truly grateful. They've moved at enormous pace to bring this about as new information has emerged over the last 48 hours. But I do absolutely believe it's better to do it once and do it with the best figures. So with that in mind, I don't believe we need to go below the line to discuss the papers unless there are any specific questions on the finance. So I'd just like to move the recommendation as it appears in the publicly published paper. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's really important. We want to do as much of the business we do in full public view, so being able to put that through and publish that outside of, while this meeting was happening, hopefully has enabled us to do that. So thank you, Nicola. Perhaps I could bring Councillor Mike White in now. I'll be the second.
Yeah, very happy to second it. Thank you, Chairman.
Great, thank you. Okay, some really good work, and it's about a wider strategy, isn't it? About how we can use our mainstream provision to make sure more of our children have the ability to be taught in their own communities as well. Okay, so now I'll bring in the chair of Overview and Scrutiny, Councillor Richard Burton. Richard, good afternoon. Sorry, nearly said good morning. Richard.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Just a point. Yeah, last Tuesday at a children's ONS, we did discuss this, and the ONS, children's ONS, were very much in favour of this. Seems very innovative and an interesting plan here. I feel the disappointment that the costs have gone up. I shan't talk about the cost directly because there's not wanted to go under the line, and I've noticed that that they are now closer to or slightly higher than the DFE suggested costs, which I do feel we need to keep an eye on. But I do also understand very much the reasons for that, and the fact that those costs actually are, looking at the paper, slightly out of date as well. And we all know that costs have increased. So just we do need to keep an eye on these costs. But I know my committee will still be very much in favour.
Which is appreciated. Okay, I don't have any other members of Cabinet wishing to speak, so perhaps Councillor, we're going to ask you to sum up and reflect on Councillor Burton's comments. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Councillor Burton, for reminding me that it was in fact Tuesday that we met last week rather than Monday, but also for your support. As soon as I found out of the about the change in the figures, we were able to speak. And what I have committed to Councillor Burton is that I will be very happy to come back and report that change to the next Overview and Scrutiny meeting to close that that loop. Just a note, I think, on in terms of the government's value for money figures, and we are round about there or thereabouts, depending on which of the tenders is actually taken forward. As Councillor Burton points out, those figures themselves are were published a little while ago. And clearly it's important that we are mindful of them, but I think we also need to do an overall value for money piece of work around all the additional places that are put in, because you can't just look at one, and this is a small number, 8 or 9 children, whereas some of the large programmes we've done have come in at considerably below that because they have been, if you like, more straightforward expansions of buildings. Some of them require purchase of property, and there are a whole host of things to be taken into account. And certainly as the programme builds, I very much welcome the opportunity to look at the scheme, the programme overall. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So we've got those recommendations as put. Will all those in favour please show? That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to agenda item 10, which is a BCP Community Safety Partnership Strategy. And I'll ask Councillor Bobby Dove to introduce the paper. Bobby.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. CSP, which is the Community Safety Partnership, is a partnership which is chaired by Dorset Police and has all of our vital partners and services around the table, including health, schools, safeguarding boards, fire, youth offending team. Our housing and social care PFH has also joined us to ensure we don't work in silos and that we have a full wraparound service as we move forward. Post-COVID world, we commissioned a strategic assessment just to ensure that actually what we're doing is what we need to be doing, that we still have our priorities identified and that we aren't just making assumptions that there are needs because that's what happened in the past or pre-COVID world, but actually we are reevaluating what it is that we now need to be doing. So strategic assessment's been taking place since it's part of the paper. As it just happened though, as we were undertaking this piece of work, a quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu came on my desk and landed there, and it kind of struck a resonance with me. And he said, there comes a point when we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in. And it's on this basis and with this quote in mind that we wrote the new CSP strategy. So the partnership now takes the approach of developing a strategy that centres around three main priorities, which can threaten residents' quality of life and youth aspirations. And we want to build a place where residents and visitors are safe. So we're literally quite going back to basics and ensuring that support is in place at the very earliest of opportunities. And let's not forget, for some, that they are often the victims before they become the offenders. So we have this now in place to ensure that we get there early enough to turn lives around and so that our residents and families have better outcomes. The public health approach is centre to all that we do and comes before we start enforcing, such as arrest and entry into the judicial system. Three main priorities are tackling violent crime in all its forms, keep young people and adults at risk safe from exploitation, including online risks, work with communities to deal with antisocial behaviour and crime hotspots, including drug dealing. And below that, we will have PCGs, partnership coordination groups, which will run the streams of work so that we can meet the priorities written within the strategy. With these priorities in mind, PCG will look to address both the human, social and environmental factors that drive people to crime. And once we've understood these factors, we can look at inventions most likely to have a positive impact and the ways we can work with communities to prevent and combat them. We have to ensure that victims and communities are central to the development of our commissioning and delivery of service, and this includes early education settings and where there are complex and additional needs such as families, personal substance misuse, poor mental health, learning needs and other protected characteristics. So just to reiterate, when I say victims, this could be potential entrance to the judicial system. So with this strategy, we hope to develop a new way of working, to have a complete wraparound multi-agency service, ensure that we are upstream enough so we can stop our vulnerable people falling into the river in the first instance. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I will ask, just going to my notes, who is seconding that, which is Karen, to Karen second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to second. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so let's see who is coming to speak. I've got no members of the wider council coming in, so we'll go to Cabinet colleagues and bring in first Councillor Hazel Allen. Afternoon, Hazel.
Thank you, Leader, to commend this, and just to say that we're working in my area of interest, which is homelessness, which unfortunately can be driven by episodes of incarceration and issues around drug and alcohol misuse, and that actually we do need to think about, just as Councillor Dove said, about when sadly those cycles start, and they can often be very early, coming out of care or in young people. And the more we can do to prevent, the better. And I was just going to say that this goes very much in line with the work going on around homelessness, where we're trying to move much more to a prevention position rather than constantly just reacting to issues that come, and dealing with people that have ended up in a very complex situation because of, you know, lots of factors that have happened in their lives, which have led, sadly, also possibly to crime and to going in and out of prison, and that can often lead to homelessness. So I just like to say that this is excellent, and prevention is certainly where we need to be moving towards. And I'm just really really pleased to see this coming forward. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Okay, so I don't have any other members who wish to speak. So, Councillor Bob, would you like to sum up?
Thank you very much. I don't really have much more to add, but I must mention that we will report progress through an annual scrutiny, and then the next date for that will be December.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that's great. So move to the vote now. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is passed. Great. So we move to agenda item 11, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution, which I believe are. Was there one?
Yes, there was one recently, Chairman, regarding the appointment of the chair.
Future places.
Yeah, future places. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That was a decision we were looking to take at the full council meeting that was postponed, and in consultation with me, we decided that it was still something we wanted to move forward with at pace. So asked the Chief Executive to use his emergency powers. Thank you very much for that. That takes us to agenda item 12, which is a Cabinet Forward Plan, which has been recently just been published, so is now up to date. Key on that is also the new paper we bring next month around cost of living and how we're responding to that. Do we have any other comments or questions in terms of the forward plan? No? So then it leaves me to say, however you've interacted and watched this meeting today, thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you to Cabinet CMB, Democratic Services colleagues as well, and we look forward to the meeting we have at the back end of October, when we'll be showing our balanced budget position. Thank you.